Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray you're all well. Okay, so Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We resume our Q&A. And I have a list of questions, well, a long list today, so let's see what we can get through. Starting with, so the first question is, how long will the good believers stand on the day of judgment? So we know from various riwayat and what the scholars of tafsir have said, that the day of judgment will pass for the disbelievers as the equivalent of 50,000 years. And there's a hadith in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal where the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it would be, the exact wording would be, he said, I swear by the one in whose hand is my soul, indeed it will be lightened for the believer until it's briefer than an obligatory prayer which he prayed in the world. What most prayers last for 5 minutes. So it's perfectly possible. Allah can make the perception of time extend, and for some people, and He can make it short. We see this on the day of judgment. In the Quran, He says, ashiyatan aw duhaha. That like when the disbelievers are asked, how long did you spend in the dunya? They said, an evening or a morning, so it's it can be extended, and even with us, the human beings, what you find, there's something called a flow state, which is where if you're sufficiently skilled in a matter and you really get into it, like the passage of time disappears. It's like when they say time flies when you're enjoying yourself, so it's like that. So a flow state like that. So that's what happens. So yeah, that's how long the day of judgment will be experienced by the believers. Okay, so I'll come to your questions, inshallah ta'ala. Let's just also cover some of these. Are there any limitations to making dua? Okay, so the first thing to understand is when you make a dua, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, but as an expression of your slavehood. Allah's not bound, He doesn't have to give you exactly what you want. But out of His generosity, He does respond to our du'as. Either we get what we ask for, or He subhanahu wa ta'ala saves the good that you ask for and gives us something in exchange for it in the akhirah. So you don't get what you want here, but you get something better in the akhirah, and that's the best case scenario, honestly, because that lasts forever. And then or some equivalent harm is deflected from you in your life. But even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you what you want, He does it in His time, in His way. So we can't dictate. So we have to understand that. So there are things that you cannot ask for. You can't ask for things that are generally impossible, right? Oh Allah, turn my entire street into one big marshmallow, so I can just bite the pavement when I want, or something like that, ridiculous like that. No, right? So you don't ask for anything that's generally seen as impossible. For most people, yes, it can happen, as a karama. But for most people, flying is impossible, right? Physically flying themselves, not in a plane, and so you can't ask for that. And so they're the limitations, and you can't ask for something haram to be made halal for you, unless it's like a particular individual is you can't be alone with them because they're not your spouse, and you pray for for marriage with that person. and then they will be halal. So that's one scenario where yes, but generally, you can't ask for like, pork to be made halal for you or something like that. So they're the basic general adab. You don't ask for anything that's impossible, because that's bad adab with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the world, and there's a set of rules and on how it goes, and it's not going to change. He could change it if he wants and make a miracle happen, but you can't make demands of him of that. And then with the rulings of the Sharia, you can't ask for something that's haram to be made halal or something like that. Wow. There's a lot of questions that I just can't come. Okay. Right. Right, let's come to some of these questions. So, wa alaikum salam to everyone. What does it mean to love people for the sake of Allah? How can we attain this? Should we feel guilty for loving our spouses for our own reasons? Okay, loving someone for the sake of Allah is very simple. You put Allah in the picture, right? So, for example, if you see someone who prays, fasts, dresses like a Muslim, acts like a Muslim, they have, the character of a Muslim, you generally feel a little bit of fondness for this person. That fondness is because there's a religious factor that's connecting you. You go to a class, and you have your teachers, you have your fellow students, the people who organize all these things. You feel good in their company because of a religious connection that you have. That is love for the sake of Allah, right? And it can also be manifested as, if someone has some religious virtues, right? Some qualities that are praised in the religion, and you like them for these qualities, that's love for the sake of Allah. Or someone who you meet regularly and you sit with them to praise Allah, to learn about the religion. Your company with them is for the sake of Allah, and any fondness that you have for that person is love for the sake of Allah. It's as simple as that. It's not a complicated thing. How can you attain this? Just be around people who are trying to get closer to Allah. Find someone who you get on with, and that affection that you have for them, with them, will be affection for the sake of Allah. And affection for the sake of Allah and love for the sake of Allah should remain unless there's something of harm or something like that coming from the person. Then as long as Allah is in the picture, then that love will remain. And so it's something that lasts through the time of the dunya into the akhirah forever. Should we feel guilty for loving our spouses for our own reasons? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The Prophet ﷺ loved his spouses, loved his children, loved his friends, the Sahaba. All of this, what you should do, you look at your spouse and you think, this spouse of mine is a gift from Allah. So I'm going to love this gift that Allah has given me. So, and then if you feel affection towards your spouse because of their looks or their character, the time you spend, your experiences together, all of that is a gift from Allah. So love your spouse and intend Allah, oh Allah, I'm going to show love to them. I'm going to feel love to this person for you. And that's sufficient. Don't feel, some people get this idea that becoming spiritual means becoming less human. No, spirituality is enhancing our humanity, right? Yes, we have human faults and flaws, and spirituality entails you have the concept of our slavehood to Allah and then our humanity. Any human trait that contradicts slavehood to Allah, such as miserliness and these sorts of things, we try to get rid of them, and that enhances our slavehood to Allah. But being human and feeling these things is not a contradiction. And even like if you look at some of the words of some of the righteous, where they say, where they love only Allah, it doesn't mean that literally. It means that the love of Allah is the basis of all other love that they have with their spouses, their friends, whoever. So it's as though it's for the sake of Allah. So it's as though they're only loving Allah and what Allah loves. So that's basically it. Okay. Okay, Allah bless you all. Can you ask a known wali who's a friend of Allah, an ally of Allah, who's passed away to make a dua for you when you stand in front of their grave? Absolutely, right? You believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefits and harms, and the dua of people, benefits them. And when you recite something and you donate the reward to this person, which is perfectly fine according to Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it's fine. So, and if they're, we know from the hadith that, the deceased, when they're buried, they hear the footsteps, of the people departing and entering, and you say salam to the people in the graves, don't you? And you can ask them to pray for you. That's not a problem. Okay. Right, let me answer some of these on my list and I'll come back to these. Right. How does one maintain a sustaining path in seeking knowledge? I'm not entirely sure what this means. If the question is about how does one consistently seek knowledge, then the first step would be a timetable, right? If you're seeking knowledge, I had a practice when I was, even before I went to Syria, I had a practice of, for example, Sunday mornings I used to have a class, sometimes on Saturday nights, evenings, I travel to a different town for a class, and you say, okay, that time is for this activity and nothing else. When you come home, especially if you're working or if you have other obligations, then you say, say Tuesday evenings is for this class, nothing else. And you don't let anything come in the way. If you just think, right, I'm studying, I'm seeking knowledge, as and when I find an opportunity, I'll study. It won't happen. It won't happen. Yes, have a routine, and then if you want to add stuff to it as and when, great. But keep to a schedule. Secondly, teachers. Have a teacher. Right? Don't try to go it alone, and consult with your teachers. What should I study? How should I study? Should I do this first? Should I do that? Okay, I've studied this. Is my understanding correct? Ask questions about your studies. And the third thing is review. Don't just learn and fly ahead. Right? Review what you've learned. And we all forget things. You go ask any scholar. Annually, they revise the knowledge on the Hajj. Before every Eid prayer, or at least once a year, they revise what they know about the Eid prayer. Udhiyah, sacrifice, they revise these things. Why? Because people tend to forget. You might remember the bigger things, but the details might slip. So keep going over it. Right, keep going over it. Consistency is you make a schedule, you stick to the schedule, and you be around and you spend time around, whether it's physically or virtually now in our times, people of knowledge, and interact with them like that. And that's how you gain consistency in seeking knowledge. And and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So okay, let's have one more from there. We'll come back to these. What is the legal ruling of studying Tajweed? Okay, so studying Tajweed, so for the legal ruling, we're going to go to the fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh. Because if you look in the Tajweed books, they'll say studying Tajweed is wajib. And that's wajib sina'i, that's their interpretation of the ruling, because that's their focus. The scholars of Tajweed had this focus, and so that's what they write in their books. If you speak to the fuqaha, there's a degree of wujub where you have to be able to recite something that sounds like Arabic. Right, so your letters, soundings, if when you're trying to recite the Quran, for example, and it sounds nothing like Arabic, it sounds more like, another language, then clearly you're not reciting the Quran. So you have to be able to pronounce the letters of the Arabic language. Most people can do this to a reasonable degree, and with a bit of practice and a bit of talent, people can master the recitation. It's not difficult. It's not difficult. Some people have a challenge, and I suppose the older you are, it might be difficult in some ways. But you do the best you can, right? So the basic recitation of how to recite, that much would be wajib, right? As for the rules and the application of all of the rules of Tajweed, the Izhar and the Itbaq and the Isti'la and the Ghunna and the Ikhfa and all of these rulings, it is mustahab. There's two layers. There's one it's a fard kifaya, it's a communal obligation. So in the ummah and in communities, there should be people who have studied this to the required degree. That's a communal obligation. If no one's done it, they're sinful, right? But once some people have covered this, so there's people for others to go to learn, then on other individuals, as long as they've learned the basics, it's mustahab. It's highly recommended, but it's not obligatory or wajib. So that's the ruling of studying Tajweed according to the fuqaha. Okay, right. Is there any Islamic virtue in a woman hiding from society? It's depressing to remain at home. Is there any dislike in us enjoying the outdoors? Okay, no, absolutely. There's no harm in a lady going out, and whether it's for work or for other social reasons, especially for well-being reasons. Our time is not like the times of the past. There was a command to the wives of the Prophet, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ, and remain in your houses. And for legitimate reasons, even they went out. They went out to perform the Hajj. Aisha went to other places, and for legitimate reasons, right? And the explicit command was given to them. Some of the fuqaha have said that command then transfers onto the ladies of the ummah. But times are different, right? If it did apply, our times are different to times in the past. And so, for well-being, right? Like if you're saying it's depressing to be indoors, it can get depressing. It can get very difficult. And even with the idda rulings, for example, where ladies to stay indoors, there are certain of the fuqaha, like in the Maliki school, where they allow a lady to go out, and as long as she's back home by, say what we say, 6-7 o'clock, when people normally return home from work, and retire to their houses for the night, they can go out, ladies can go out and be back home by then. Why? Because they recognize the difficulty of the situation. So is any Islamic virtue in a woman hiding from society? No. And our society, someone can have a huge reward if a lady dresses appropriately, loose clothing that doesn't accentuate the figure, the face and hands and feet can be shown, and she goes and acts modestly. And this can be a huge way of sharing their religious practice without overtly sharing it, and people look at her. A lot of non-Muslim ladies, people look in society and it seems like everyone's having fun, but they're not, right? And there are people out there that recognize this, all the indecency and immorality out there, and they see that it's not right, and it doesn't sit well with them. And then for them to look at a lady who's practicing and dressed properly and modest, and it's a huge source of inspiration for many of these people. And so it's great, in that regard. So technically there is something the fuqaha talk about, is that the rulings of the Sharia regarding ladies, like praying and these sorts of things, it's based on sitr. That the default is that it's based on veiling or covering themselves, right? And so like, for a lady to be out, like if she's naturally loud or something, then just don't draw tons of attention to yourself. If you got a loud laugh, just carefully don't go out into the middle of the street and just start laughing so everyone's looking at you, drawing untoward attention, right? Which is also what we talked about last week. Someone asked about clothing. You don't go wear these really luminous and bright clothes. You can wear nice clothes, nice designs, whatever, but appropriate to the situation. Yes, at weddings and on Eid, you can wear something that's a bit brighter and louder, you could say. But the same thing with you find with the rulings of the prayer. So the way, like a lady, where she stands, how she stands, the ruku', she only has to bow slightly for the ruku', and the way she goes into the sujood and these sorts of things, Allah has, we've been taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for ladies to pray in this way, which is concealing as it is. But no, as for lock them up and don't let them out, that's not the case. But there has to be this understanding and application of modesty as well. Okay. What do we need to do to rectify in regards to the rights of people before the day when there's no dirham, before the day of judgment? If you owe them any money, pay it back. If you've taken any of their property, give it back, right? And if you owe someone anything, if you've got something that belongs, even if it's a book, right, that belongs to someone that you've wrongfully taken, then make sure you give it back, right? And before you die. And if you've wronged them in other ways, if you can apologize, I saw that the question apologies, we'll talk about that then. And if you can apologize. But sometimes, it's a case of, if you go and say to someone, I did this, by the way, it was me who scratched your £80,000 sports car or whatever. If you say something like this, it's likely to make things worse than what you do. There, you would have to pay them back, right? If you damage their property. But if you say something, it was me that spread that rumor about you or something like that, then if mentioning it to them is just going to worsen things, they're going to get into a fight or something, then ask them for forgiveness through another means, which is what? Do good deeds. Do some good deeds. Do it regularly. And say, oh Allah, anyone who I have wronged, give them the reward of these deeds. So do it regularly, so you build up quite a bit. And then when you turn up on the day of judgment and they find out you said this about me, you did this, you can say, I'm very sorry and I worked in my life to compensate you. And then they'll see the deeds that you gifted them. And hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, they'll think, well, there's no dirhams here, and there's no dinars, no silver or gold coins, but the currency of that day, deeds, you've given me plenty of that. So they'll say, okay, hopefully, inshallah. So that's what we do. All right. Let's come back to some of these other questions. Does a nosebleed invalidate one's wudu? Yes. Any flowing of blood. What do we mean by that? If you cut yourself, if any blood comes out and it just bubbles up and just sits on the surface, that doesn't invalidate your wudu, and that blood is not considered impure. But if the blood was to come out and then just move of its own volition, not with you, let's say it's come out and then you knock it against something and then it moves. No, we're not talking about that. Enough blood comes out, so he has enough momentum to move off his spot, even if it's half a centimeter, right? If it moves, it's flowed. If it's flowed like that, it's invalidated your wudu. And if that's the case, then you need to renew your wudu. So the same thing, a nosebleed, it's come from wherever in the nose it's come, but if it comes, by the time it comes down, it's already flowed. So yes, it does invalidate your wudu. Okay, let's have a look here. Alaikum salam. If someone living in Haram has done multiple umrahs but entered, if someone living in the Haram has done multiple umrahs but entered the state of ihram from their homes in the Haram, what's required? If they redo the umrah, will the dam be lifted? Yes. Okay. So we have, think of three areas. So you have Mecca and the surrounding area, which is called the Haram. And then you have the mawaqit, the miqats, the places that you cannot pass without an ihram if you're intending to go to Mecca. Right? The area between the Haram and the miqats, that area is called the hill. Right? The hill and the Haram. And then everything else is just beyond, right? The afaq. So if you live in the Haram, you have to, which is in Mecca, you have to exit it, go to the nearest miqat, which is Tan'im, where Masjid Aisha is. You have to go there, enter into an ihram, and then come back, and then you do the umrah. So in order to perform an umrah, you need to leave Mecca. So you go to one of the mawaqit, so the closest one, Tan'im. But if you just enter into an ihram and then do the umrah activities, actions in Mecca without going to the miqat, then you have to sacrifice, right? But as the question said, yes. If you go back to the miqat and then enter into an ihram and come back, no, I think you'd have to do another umrah. I need to check this. I think, you have to do another umrah. So if you enter into an ihram in Mecca, and then you go to the miqat and come back, it's fine, right? Because you've gone to the miqat and whatever, you've exited the Haram and you've come back, that would compensate for it. But if you've already done it, then I think you would have to give a sacrifice. But if you went and did another umrah instead, I think that I'm gonna check this. It's been a while. You'd have to do another. You'd have to give a dam to compensate for it. Okay, right. Okay, what else we got? Is it nifaq, hypocrisy, to stop a certain sin in the hopes Allah rewards one in this life with, for example, marriage? No, it's not. It's not. Leaving sins is an act of worship, and if you leave a sin, we see how many times we see in the Quran where Allah says He's Ghafoor followed by Rahim. So Ghafoor, He forgives anything, absolutely anything, no matter how heinous the sin is. And then Rahim, extremely kind. So the ulama of tafsir say He forgives and He follows that forgiveness up. Remember, the person's a committed sin, so He forgives and then He follows that up with gifts. So someone can have this good intention and hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pardon them and then reward them with something of the good. So it's not a problem. I'm not sure if my parents are true with their taxes. I'm afraid if I take tuition, which is based on my parents' yearly income, I'm not sure if their income on paper is true. Ask your parents. That's the first step. Are you doing anything dodgy? And because if they're lying, tell them, look, what you're doing is you're lying, and that's a problem, right? And I've seen people argue, the government, they take too much money, especially if you've got a business or whatever, 40%, and okay, right? But okay, you might be out of pocket a bit, but if you start lying, then you have sins to deal with. And it becomes a problem when someone thinks, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll just do this, or it doesn't matter, everyone does it. Then it becomes a problem. So ask them, are you being honest? Can I claim based on this? And if they're not lying, ahlan wa sahlan. If they are lying, well, you want to get them to stop. Can you claim based on their false things? No, you can't. See if you can find another way of financing yourself. You know, a very common question that people ask is about student loans, and that's a problematic situation, right? It's riba, and Allah hates riba. And then this is usually when I say this, people start panicking and saying, no, but how can we pay for our education and this and the other? And it's simple, you know. Like in England, a normal degree, what do they charge? 9,000 or so a year. Go and work, you know. I don't think most parents would have an issue with their children not going to university and working, temporarily. Go and work. And if you're living at home, even if you're working a basic job, you can save 9,000 a year. And most people, if you start at 18, by the time, if it's a degree, it's 3 years. By the time you're 21, you'll have saved enough, and you can keep working throughout university and pay for yourself. There's a way around that. If your degree is 5 years or so more, then a little bit longer, but you save yourself from a lot of problems. And there's I can think of so many people that took out student loans, and problem after problem after problem in their life. It's a big issue, right? So anyway, right, let me come back to these other questions. How do I seek out scholars if there are not any in one's area? Well, what benefits is company, and company, you can keep people's company virtually as well. It's not the same. Someone who attends a class physically gets so much more than someone who attends online, right? What about if the teacher's doing it online? It's because the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends, the sakina, the tranquility, the angels come. This room that I teach in, I have a friend who's a very righteous man, and he's quite, let's say he has a sensitive soul, and so he's walked into this room a number of times, and he says, I can feel barakah, I can feel a lot of barakah descending in this room, even when there's no class happening. Why? Because of the barakah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down. And he even brought his son, who's a good boy, a really good young boy, and he seems to have inherited that sensitivity, and he brought him in here and he said, this room feels different. And so it's like that. And so so virtual company, if there's no one in your area, firstly, you don't always need the company of the ulama. If you need to learn, yes, but most of the time scholars or teachers, they have a lot on, and it's not always possible to spend a lot of time with them, in their personal lives or being friends or whatever. Find some religious friends and sit down together, try and sing some the burda, sing some poetry, do some dhikr together every once in a while. That helps a lot. But if it comes to being around scholars, then great. Then virtually, then you can you benefit from the company of people through their books. Go buy some of the books that have been translated by Imam al-Ghazali, Imam Abdullah al-Haddad. Excellent books, and you can benefit from their company and their knowledge through those books. Study with people online, join, like we're doing now, join lessons, Q&A sessions, whatever, online, if you don't have access to someone. And occasionally, save some money and then go visit. If there's like a retreat happening somewhere, save some money and go spend some time there on these retreats. There's one in not far from here in Bradford. What's it called? The Trodden Path, right? I believe Habib Qadim and a few others are going to come. And go if you have the money. Go sit there and benefit from them. Excellent, and that's another excellent way. I had one of the brothers who I was teaching a few years ago, he was from some European country, and he said, I don't know, he just had a really good opinion of me, and I don't know. And so he's like, I want to come, come spend some time with you, stay at your house. And I politely excused myself. And I thought later, I messed up. I should have let him come and done a Mr. Miyagi on him, right? Paint my fence. No, I'm just joking. Right, that would just be, taking advantage of someone. But all right, let's have a question here. Walaikum salam. Can you tell the ruling? Tell me the ruling on movies, as in if we follow these rules then it's halal. Please also expand on the aura, the foul language, what is okay for adults and not kids. Okay. Right. So the ruling on movies, it really branches off. There's a couple of issues when we talked about. One is about spare time and free time, and in our times, I was talking about gaming last week. The issue on, in our time, people are just not built to be ibadah machines. You're just constantly worshipping and constantly seeking knowledge. A lot of people need some avenue, some way of relieving their stress. So a clean halal outlet for that stress, it varies. Some people go to the gym, some people go on walks, some people go play five-a-side football, and some people, everyone's different. Some people read a book, and some people, want to do some. So I did recommend, like, gaming has some positive, as long as you avoid anything that's like nudity or something like that, and avoid gambling in games, loot boxes and these sorts of things, then it'll be fine. So movies would be the same. It would, if it's haram to look at, then haram to watch, right? So aura, the aura of men is anything between the navel and the knees. And for ladies, face, hands, feet. There is a position some of the fuqaha have said about, say, a non-Muslim lady's hair is fine, right? There is a position. It's not the strongest position, but generally, if you're going to watch something, don't watch something with the aura showing or anything like that. If it's just a slight amount, then just look away or whatever. But the content has to be clean. You don't be watching something that's promoting indecency, right? So, encouraging it and whatever. Especially if you have, children, if they're watching. So a lot of morals and values, if they think, zina and these sorts of things are fine and acceptable, because they've been watching something like this, and all the other perversions that are displayed, then no, right? And it just makes sense not to, especially with younger children. And this is what I said last week, that it's better to have your younger children, ideally avoid screens, right? Especially for the first few years. But if there's no other way around it, it's better to give them something here, go play Mario or Sonic or something. That's better than just letting them watch something without indiscriminately. God knows what kind of agendas are being subtly pushed in a lot of the educational shows in our times. So you be careful with regards to that. Foul language, don't let your kids watch that. It's not, because especially people who use it themselves, the kids start using it, and if they hear it and they think it's acceptable, I know it can be a challenge in curating this, but you don't want to end up harming your kids. And so generally what's okay for adults is and not for kids, maybe like something scary, like if there's something scary, you don't if you sit there, you can watch something that's scary, which doesn't have any sort of indecency in it, and it's something that would be inappropriate for kids. Fair enough, right? Then, but all the other rules are applying, and don't waste every day, every moment of your of every day on it, right? you should have time in your life as a believer. So the general ruling in the Hanafi school is that you do things that benefit in your deen or your dunya, right, or your akhirah. So something in deen, like learning knowledge and praying, worship, is something that's going to benefit in your dunya, such as what's it called? Such as developing a skill. I have a friend, he spent his spare time learning coding, so he can code stuff on his computer. Great. Developing a skill, learning how to make websites, learning how to edit videos, whatever, right? So something that'll benefit in your dunya you can use to bring, or playing sports, right? Which, with the aura covered and everything like that, it benefits in your dunya, no problem, right? Or so in your deen or your dunya, and things that benefit in your akhirah, learning sacred knowledge, sitting there making dhikr, reading the Quran, studying some tafsir, studying something about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of this will spend on that. One of the aspects of the things about the dunya is so in the Hanafi school is basically this, right? And you can play some sports, time with the spouse and family, all that's positive. And then you can bring something into deen with a good intention. And a good intention is going to be with regards to rest and relaxation. You can't always be full steam ahead, right? Al-munbat la dhahran abqa wala ardan qata'. So the Prophet ﷺ gave the example of someone who's on an animal like a horse, and he's just constantly, urging it forward. He said he doesn't leave his animal alive, neither does he cross much land, right? Because he's just driven his animal that he's riding on to death, right? So you don't do that. So if you are to watch something, it's Allahumma salli ala Sayyid Muhammad. Then do it as an occasional thing, occasional something just to let your hair down, for example, so on and so forth. Or you can do other things. I tend to I listen to a lot of audiobooks, right? And so maybe a little bit here, a little bit there. I can do it whilst I'm, got some other activities or whatever. Or like when I'm driving, if I'm driving to a class or something, I'll stick an audiobook on. And so great, you can do something like this. There is another added complexity for some people, where sometimes people have traumatic experiences, and so what happens is they end up engrossed in activities. So it's like, they whatever they do to an extreme, right? So someone like this, why? Because it's like an addiction to try and avoid, or not deal with the pain, or they're struggling with the pain, they end up in an activity. Someone can get engrossed into a lot of this. If you're doing too much of it, or then either actively take the steps to healing. But if it's happening like this, then you ask Allah, oh Allah, help me, fix my life, help me sort things out, and so I can find a better balance in my life. If you have seen something that's not appropriate, astaghfirullah, oh Allah, forgive me. But just be careful, because especially with the case of addiction, sometimes people can watch things, and then one thing leads to watching something else that's more graphic, let's say, and then it gets worse. So you just be careful around that. But kids, just be careful with what you let your kids watch, right? Just be responsible parents. Okay, all right. So don't make it something where time is constantly being wasted. Do other things as well, right? Have some time for worship. Make sure it doesn't affect your prayers. So, for example, if you think, well, I'm going to go to a cinema, but then the film is it goes over Asr and Maghrib time or whatever, and you'll miss the prayers. No, right? Your prayer is more important. Right? And it would become haram to go do that if you're going to be missing prayers because you're sat there, watching the latest blockbuster or whatever. All right. How do we understand the quotes of the Salaf and the righteous scholars like Imam al-Juwayni that are seemingly critical of Imam Abu Hanifa? This did happen, and let's be honest about it. That some of the early scholars, they did have an ilmi disagreement with Abu Hanifa, and there was a lot of some of them. There was this understanding, and I think it came from their being defensive for the deen. The fuqaha of Kufa, where Abu Hanifa was from, they were called Ahlul Ra'i, the people of opinion, which literally it means like, we made some of the scholars of hadith think, well, they just make stuff up. I think the ruling here is this, and that's not the case. And the scholars of hadith generally, and Imam al-Juwayni and Imam al-Ghazali, and those who inherited the Shafi'i madhab's approach, they generally tended to view Abu Hanifa and the scholars of Iraq as falling into this bracket, the Ahlul Ra'i. They don't base their religious positions on the hadith and these sorts of things. It was a misunderstanding, and it was perpetuated, and people made statements that are generally problematic. But if you look at someone like Shaykh Ahmad ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, radiallahu anhu ardah, in his one of his bio works, he praised Imam, and he was a Shafi'i. He praised Abu Hanifa to no end, and the ulama that were fair and balanced, and they were open and honest. But there was historically a bit of a rivalry between the fuqaha from Kufa and then the scholars who had an expertise in hadith. So what do? We say, Allah bless all of them and forgive all of them and pardon all of their mistakes and reward all of them on our behalf. And we zip it after that, right? And you just leave their differences to themselves. And who knows, maybe they're all basking in the rays of paradise, in their graves together. And, and then there's people in our times writing books about, well, he was like this and so-and-so was like that. So Allah knows best. Okay. How to apologize to someone if it feels awkward and the words won't come out? Well, generally apologies are like that, aren't they? So if you can't apologize verbally, write it and just say, I'm writing it because I find it difficult to say this, but here it is. And just be honest. And depending on the type of apologies, some people apologize and they're actually blaming the other person whilst they're apologizing. I'm sorry, but you made me do it, right? Or I'm sorry if you feel offended. Apology should be about contrition. And just take a lesson from Sayyidina Adam, right? Rabbana zalamna anfusana, our dear Lord, we wronged ourselves, so my fault. And don't be like Iblis, where he blamed Allah, right? So show that you regret what you did and apologize, and then you leave it to the person. If they want to forgive you or not, then that's up to them. Okay. Alaikum salam. Okay, right. Can ladies who have to stay in the ihram state for a longer period of time due to menstruation use all kinds of cosmetic products as long as they're not perfumed? Deodorant, cream, cleansing gel. Yes, a lady in ihram can use cosmetic products as long as it's not perfumed. So it's the perfume that's the issue. The other issue of, is it halal to go, like if you're talking about, putting on nail polish and, makeup and everything, going around, Makkah taking selfies or whatever, then no, the rulings of makeup apply, which is anything that's going to attract undue attention, is not allowed. Covering blemishes is fine, but if she's still in ihram, and can she use something, deodorant, cream, and things like this, that doesn't have a smell? Absolutely, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Okay, let me come back to some of these questions. All right. Is there an expiation for breaking a promise no, there's no expiation for breaking a promise. Rather, if you make a promise with the intention of not fulfilling it, you'd be sinful, right? But if you make a promise intending that I will carry it out, and then you can't, something comes in the way, or it's just impractical, difficult, and you don't fulfill the promise, then you just apologize to the person, and it's not a sin, right? It's not sinful. So there's no expiation. There's nothing that needs to be done to compensate. Okay. There's some here that are quite long. All right. What does it mean Allah created us in pairs? وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. So generally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He's made us. This won't be popular with the current identity politics and all that. When Allah made us, biologically, Allah's made us as one of two genders, male or female. And yes, some people, a very small number of people can be born with both sets of sexual organs, but that's an exception. That's a test for that person. But He's saying, so Allah has made human beings in pairs. So it doesn't mean that everyone has a soulmate out there, as people tend to misinterpret this and other verses like this. What it means is Allah has made us as males and females, and yes, there's the capacity of finding someone who you can get married to, you can be intimate with, you can share everything and love with all your heart, and then for them to love you back. That's part of it, and that's how the species continues and grows. And so that's part of the meaning, and that we made you in pairs, that people generally have spouses and carry on like this. So that's the general meaning of it. I did cover this in detail. If you look up on the Seekers Guidance YouTube page, the Essentials of Quranic Understanding certificate, there's the first lesson where in the very first session we covered the beginning of Surah An-Naba, and I've covered this in detail there. Okay. The next one. Let me answer your questions. Okay. Can women who have to stay in I just answered that. Why is music, according to some, prohibited when the Ummah have such a rich influence, history on music, even the Umayyads? Well, the ruling on music comes from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not from the rest of the Ummah. So there is a difference of opinion, and with a lot of instruments, the position is that they're impermissible. Music is, we have some answers on it, so you can check them. But the music's a very nuanced issue, because are all sounds impermissible? No, absolutely not. Like if you walk into a supermarket and they're playing something in the background, do you have to leave? Well, no, right? And is it in every situation, is it impermissible? No, right? But as for the rich history, and a lot of the times you have people who just don't care about the ruling, they're going to go and do what they want. So it might be in that situation, right? So that's where the rich history came from. There is this issue of sama', listening to spiritual things, and there's that's a discussion for another day, right? I'll be honest with you. And the fuqaha did have differing opinions on that. But generally, even even the scholars that say it would be permissible, I don't think what most people class as music now, pop music with all the it's the nature of that music. What is it? It's there to either aggrandize and praise the haram, like this rap music and everything, or it's there to accentuate feelings in people, like say they have an infatuation with someone else, and just make them, increase that. Which is the nature of lyrics anyway, right? And that can happen whether it's in a halal way or a haram way. And then what does it lead to? It leads to people acting on their desires and stuff like that. So even that would be considered impermissible. So yeah. So I can see, so like I said, there's many nuances to this. So like, for example, nasheed artists who put music in their things, and there's a difference of opinion on this. And then some argue, well, it can be, we need some middle ground for people who want to change and want to come to Islam, but they're stuck in a lifestyle. This helps. So there are arguments, and it's something that inshallah ta'ala we'll cover in detail at some point. It requires a lot of research. I don't have it all on the top of my head. I have some understanding of certain positions, but not in a detailed way to give a summary of it all. Okay, what were the scrolls of Solomon and their relevance in Islam? Okay, so Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam, I don't think he had any scrolls. It was his father Dawood alayhi salatu wasalam. He had the Zabur, which is in the Bible is referred to as the Psalms. And Zabur in Arabic has this indication of strength. So they were powerful reminders. There wasn't any ruling of halal or haram in there, but they were powerful, strong reminders of directing a person to turn to Allah, focus on the akhirah, to repent, these sorts of things. And Allah knows best. Okay. There's a lot here. Oh my God. I'm sorry, I can't answer all of them. There's one which I have to answer now. Don't laugh, Sheikh. I have to laugh now. I'm in love with my own cousin. Only there's a 4 years difference, and I don't know how to propose to her when we are older. Right now, she's 14. Yeah. Allah. Speak to your parents. Right? Obviously, there are laws, and you can't just go up to someone and say, right, let's run away or let's get married. But if this is the case, and marriage requires certain things, right? Obviously, financial, providing for your wife and these sorts of things. But there's also a degree of maturity, and being able to shoulder responsibility and maturity in a relationship and these sorts of things. And so, work on maturing yourself. You should work, get a job, and, get used to spending on people, and other than yourself, and save a bit, spend a bit, these sorts of things. But yeah, golden rule, never be alone with her, right? And, you shouldn't really, don't go anywhere near that. And speak to your parents, just tell your parents. Don't go propose to her, tell your parents, especially if it's your cousin, right? You might, it might be facilitated. Allah facilitate what's best for you. Okay. Is it halal and tayyib money if you work in a zoo? Yeah, if you're good to animals, it's considered sadaqah, isn't it? It's considered sadaqah. There is this whole thing of the animals being captured and kept there, not in their natural habitat. Allahu a'lam, right? You can argue that both ways. But as long if you work in there and you're treating the animals well, feeding them or whatever, yeah, it's fine. Okay. What's the ruling on a husband and wife doing physical activity for enjoyment, like playing basketball? This would come down to for the lady just dressing appropriately and appropriate interaction. So like if it's not acceptable in a particular community, for her to be wearing sports clothing, and in the in the basketball court at the local park, then obviously don't. I've seen situations where ladies are dressed modestly, completely covered, and they're riding bikes, with their family members. So that might be something like that. Little acts of affection like holding hands. This really depends on where you are. In most Muslim countries, for example, holding hands taboo, no, right? But say in the West, just holding hands, I think in a lot of places, it would seem fine, right? Don't use this as a blanket ruling. Depending on where you are, like you might be in the middle of, a rich, deep Muslim community, and then if you were to hold your wife's hand and people look at you and start tutting, like, astaghfirullah, right? But if you go to the city centre, you go into a shopping centre, whatever, and you're walking and you hold hands, or in a park, it might be acceptable. So just look at what is socially seen as acceptable, and if it's seen as, if people raise their eyebrows or whatever, then no, don't do it, right? Nosebleed even if plugged, yes. My dear brother and friend. Alaikum salam, Imam Yama, Allah bless you. You can't ask any questions. You ask me. You ask me too many questions. At 2 a.m. as well. So, no, they're always welcome. Okay. All right, I'm going to have to stop here. If I didn't answer you, I do apologize. We will next week, inshallah ta'ala, I'm gonna stop. I need to pray, and I need to record a tafsir class. So if you don't listen to my tafsir class, shame on you. I'm just joking. You should listen to it. There's a lot of good and a lot of benefit the scholars of tafsir have passed down to us. So Allah give us the benefit of imbibing the good that they've taught us. Okay. Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.